Boy, today is going to be a special day. Special. They promised, once again, no rain, and I have parts to paint. Well, we know what happened yesterday. We know what happened today. We know what happened my whole previous life. The weathermen lie, but it is paintable right now, so I'm going to try to get down to the shop, have my coffee, get something sanded, and get something painted. We have really started off the year here with some very, very unpredictable weather. And I get up in the morning and I check the weather and I always say to myself, yeah, sure. But I guess that's the way it is when you're a weatherman. People hate you. Well, I think most people know. You really can't predict the weather, along with a lot of other things in life. But one thing I can predict, and I don't lie, this restoration is going to be one of our best. When it's done, I am really excited about it. We got some more parts to paint today. I just hope the weatherman cooperates. And every morning I take a picture of Treezilla. JP Tree Service, who did the work for us, took that big tree down by the pond. They are just postponing us every day. It's unbelievable. But Treezilla, your life is limited. Well, my life is limited too. And I guess that's the story for all of us. We're all living in the circle of life here. And boy, it's always good to get in out of the cold. I am always happy to get into my shop where the coffee is warm, the parts are shiny, the blondes are happy that I'm their husband. Well, anyway, today one of the things I want to work on is the dashboard. I got to take the instruments off of there. I got my parts drying up from yesterday, and I try to start every day with a little plan. I moved everything under the one heating vent, which seems to be a lot hotter than the other one. But we do run out of heating vents here. And I've had to manipulate and move things around. Now, the big decision here today is this. Some of these parts are going to stay flat black. And some this one in particular, I want to make shiny black. So the idea of this bike, and the original idea is I want it to be like my 70s race bikes that were black and gold. I wanted to simulate that on a more modern bike. Well, I think we're well on our way to doing it, and I want to have parts like the dashboard here and still things that, oh, I love the way that carbon fiber came out. I'm getting distracted here as I try to make a plan, but Karen's already got the coffee up there. We're ready, and it should be another day in paradise. Now as I come in out of the cold, she's already got the coffee working. Oh my God, no wonder I love her so much. So I try to start off every morning with the same routine. A couple of drops of Dawn and some soapy water. Stir it up a little bit. Make some bubbles. Get started on a sanding. I'm going to start the main part sanding today in Dasa. We just got a whole sleeve of it off the internet. 600, wet or dry. So this morning, when I did the email, I was real happy to hear from Ruben McBride in Las Vegas. He's out in the Las Vegas area, and he has adopted using the method we use here, leapfrogging, to his advantage, and he was really happy. He said it's great while some parts are drying. He's working on other stuff. And of course, he's a friend for many, many years. He moved out to Vegas. And Ruben, we wish you nothing but the best. I know you're enjoying some warm weather out there. I guess the weather's more predictable than over here. And I guess you don't have to worry about big ugly trees getting knocked down either in Las Vegas. You just got to worry about falling into a cactus bush or something. Imagine riding your bike off into a cactus bush. Anyway, I won't make a big deal out of doing this sand out here because we've done this before, but just recently in fact. I want to get this all sanded out, but just for people like Scott that are trying to pick up good information about sanding blocks, I always start with a block, do all the detailing by hand, get this ready for prime. Hopefully by then we won't have any change in the weather, and then we can get on to working on that instrument panel. And that should be a little trickier than it looks because it's got two different textures on it, and I want to get rid of those textures, and I've got to figure out how I'm going to do that. And I'll try to, that's why I'm doing this part first, so I can think this through. And hopefully it'll warm up a little bit out there. But I always like to show my one little part in real time, no camera cuts, and we can do the rest of this. Pretty straightforward job. You gotta wait till it dries, of course, to really see the difference. Let me wipe this off. Because I know once people can figure out what that's supposed to look like and they're sanding, it'll be so much easier. And that's it with no camera cuts. No camera cuts at all. Now, as I'm coming down the home stretch, I'm really excited about, and I didn't really think this through until today, that we're going to be on the cusp here. If I can get this part primed and in black today, then we'll have the day of laying out all the arrowheads and the first of our badging. Of course, these parts will be, that I'm working on right now, will be ready for the badging. And that badging is something I've been thinking about, John Pothy has been thinking about, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's going to work. Now, you might have noticed that by leapfrogging, and I've left the tank in the garage. Actually, I'm going to leave it there as long as possible because I don't want to have an empty tank just sitting around for 3 months. So I've kind of thought maybe I should do the tank at the very end of the restoration, because if it sits empty for 3 months, it's going to be prone to rust. Even in the cellar here, it's better off if you leave the tank full of gas to the end. So, but if I can get the graphics to come out good on a fairing, then I know that word Kawasaki on a tank will be no big deal. And thank you, John Pothy, for all the help over the years, all the graphics we've done and decals, and oh my God, just it's an unbelievable amount of work. Now the next step on this is to prep all it down. Try to get any little spot on here that's still shiny. Get some sanding tooth on it so that primer gets a good bite. It's just pretty redundant to do this. It takes time to detail it out. I've detailed it out with sanding blocks and by hand. It's been pretty time consuming doing some of these parts, but I know in the final result, it pays big time. It's like investing money. And then the day you get your interest payment, you say, wow, that was easy. Anyway, here's the bottom line to this whole thing. I've got to block off all these little tabs with some tape. I've got to get that. I don't want to lose any of those interference fits. And then I've got to go do a little check on the weather here, because again, a day like today, and the whole last couple of weeks, whatever the weatherman says, yeah, sometimes he's right about 1 out of maybe 30 times or something, but the rest of them, holy mackerel, is he wrong. What I'm going to do is tack rag this down just to make sure before I get all the masking done on it. It's a pretty involved thing to get all these tabs. There's a whole bunch of tabs and areas I don't want to paint buildup on. So I figure this might work in my favor. Then when I'm all done, just before I paint, I'll tack rag it down again. And thank you, Turbo Steve. These are great tack rags. And from where else? From Harbor Freight. Now I'm trying to be super careful about all these little tabs and tangs. And there are a lot of them. And there's all little pieces of this hard foam rubber around the headlights and stuff. And I'm sure some people would just say, forget about it. But I don't want to forget about it. I want this to be, when I put these fits and finishes together, I don't want to have a big paint buildup and they don't line up just right. Or that I have to take a sanding stick and get the fit back. See, there's a little piece of rubber up here. I want to take care of this. And when I take the tape off, I'll be really careful about not losing that. And if I do, I'll have to CA it back on. But there are a whole bunch of these on this project. Okay, all the back masking is done. The only thing left here is a final wipe with the tack rags. I wanted to make sure now, to show how critical this part is, there are little alignment tabs even in here and even down here. Those alignment tabs are where things connect when this part is all put back together. And this will be when I go to put this fairing back together, I know this is going to be a two-man job. I'll try to get somebody to come over here and volunteer to be my stooge or something. But anyway, Or I'll have the loving help of my wife if nobody shows up. She loves putting motorcycle parts together. Believe me, she does. So of course, the material of choice here, Duplicolor primer. I'm going to get a brand new can. Try to get one nice, thin, even coat on that. If there's any imperfections, we'll have to sand it and put a second coat on. But if that works out the way I want it, the most important thing, of course, any plastic or any refinish, get it to say sealer on there. Now, just a reminder to me, I always I look back at some of these old videos of some of the things we had to do to these old fairings, reinforcements, and Bondo and bodywork. This is the 750 as we were putting the 750 together. Boy, there was a lot of nasty work on that. But these old videos, even the ones of restoring, here we are with the 750, these old videos always remind me of what you can do with a relatively rough set of bodywork. And if you know how to repair it and you know how to paint it, boy, the sky's the limit. And it's really one of the motivations I have behind making these videos every day, or almost every day anyway, is people really want to have this. And if you don't have the skill to do it, especially fairing repair, if you have that skill, it's just work. It's like digging a hole. It's just work or mixing concrete. It's really not a lot of money, and you can really have. And if you can dream it, you can do it. Do one more final tack rag on this part, and we will be ready. And so far on this job, on the whole job actually, I have very little issue with fish eyes, which is, I don't know if maybe it's our lucky day. I don't know. But we're trying to get the best, absolute best quality of finish we can have on here. And a lot of it is just getting everything etched and just getting everything clean. So important. And then getting it, that first coat of primer on there, and I'm hoping we only need one coat, because that means this afternoon, we can, later in the afternoon, we'll be able to put the black on, and then we'll be all set to do the graphics very soon. Now, just looking at this under fluorescent lights, which in the shop here, that's what we have, is fluorescent lights, because it shows imperfection. Looking back at that old, at any of them, at the FZRs, it was even worse. At the 750 video, I was watching them this morning to try to build up a little energy, and I looked at some of the bodywork. Oh my God, every tab was broken, every bolt hole was stripped. And then I look at this bodywork and I think, this is a piece of cake. Miles could paint this. Well, maybe someday he will. But anyway, having those old videos to me is priceless. Anyway, while this is drying, it's time for you know what. And I'm sure the birds have emptied out the feeder, and I'm sure Karen is going to tell me some more adventures of Karen and whatever she's doing. But I've already recruited her to be on staff when we go to put this back together. This is going to be like a big jigsaw puzzle. I can see it now. And it's wonderful now having it up by that heating vent. Boy, is that ever wonderful. I'm trying to get this on video. See, before I feed the birds here for the second time today, I noticed, and Karen noticed, this bird is hanging out in our feeder for the whole morning. I don't know if he's sitting there waiting and saying, hey, what the hell, where are the seeds? That's so cute. All right, Wendy, feed me already. Feed me, Seymour. We love feeding the birds. What a great way while your primer's drying and your FZR is out in the garage getting older by the minute, and the birds don't care at all. But this is something we all care about. Even Reuben McBride in Las Vegas, I'll bet you he's out there doing his leapfrogging and drinking coffee. Way to go, Reuben. So here's the instrument pod that obviously is in pretty good shape. And here is one of the issues. We have that same texture thing that I want to sand off, because I'd like this. This actually continues down into the fairing. I want this to be bright, shiny black. But then I have this, which was on that side fairing, and I covered it with carbon fiber, so I didn't even see it. But there was a time I thought I'd take off the instruments and make this all carbon fibery, and I said, it's getting a little too carbon fibery there. That wasn't for me, but I know I can get this all ground down, sanded down by hand, maybe even use the machine on some of it, and then it'll accent that this part around the instruments is flat black. So I think overall that'll be a nice choice. Now, as happens on every project, there's always things I think are going to take a very short amount of time, and they take the better part of a day. And then there's things I get all prepared for, and I say, wow, this is going to be a terrible job. And they go pretty smoothly. Now, we lucked out having some good weather. It's not raining. The sun hasn't come out. Well, I think the sun is never going to come out again. We're in like a nuclear winter here or something. But anyway, I'm going to save these bolts. No special reason why. I'm going to put a piece of tape around them and mark them because they basically hold this together. And I'm sure this unit is a few dollars anyway. It's not one of the things like the RD I have 10 spare instruments for, but I don't have any. So this piece will not be shiny black. So that'll be a nice accent. It'll be shiny, shiny, and flat. So the big job is going to be now, I want to save that little piece of rubber that goes back there. Let me get that. I'll mask that off, in fact. And so this is going to be, well, I know sanding this down is going to be a real problem. Now, it may be that what I need to do, and I'll wait to see, is I may have to prime this and then use some of that filler primer on it. The reason for the filler primer will be to fill in any sanding scratches or gouges, and I won't know until I actually start sanding the part. Because this is going to be one of those tricky things. It's a lot more work than it looks like. And that's always a good idea to mark the bolts, even though they may not be special. I want those exact bolts to go back when I assemble a bike. So worth mentioning, these are all the parts for disassembling the bike up to the upper fairing, and then I have little notations on some of the bolts. Again, because this is not something I do every day, that'll be a big asset. And some of these bolts that look corroded, I'm going to replace. This will just make it a lot easier for me when the day comes to assemble it. And this is what I'm talking about on this job. We don't have any of this. Major repairs. I don't miss this at all. Now I want to make a little group of, I'm going to have to do this just not exactly the way I want to do it, but I have to force out these rubber bushings. Because what I want to do is I want to make a little, I'll put a piece of wire or something around them. Or I'll get a little, I guess I could get a little plastic bag that these go in the instruments. And then I have 3 of these, and I know I'll have to glue these back. This will be a problem, but I can glue them back, that's for sure. I'll have 3 of these rubber guys. And it's so nice that they build this bike. When they built it, there's all these little rubber things, and just a little quality touch is all I can say. So that'll be another thing. This will be another little set of, I always try to document this on video, that this is stuff that'll go on the instruments. Now, I've seen on some of the car shows how they bag up the parts for the doors, and a lot more parts on a car, of course, but that'll help me when I go to assemble this. But now I can work on this without all that hardware being masked off, and it'd be quite a problem to have that. I'll scrape the rest of this off with a razor, so I'll know that this hardware goes back on that when I put this back together. So what I'm going to try to do, I put on the finest grit paper that I have, and I wanted to just try to get some of this off with the machine. Now I know a couple of things that I can't do. I can't get in all the corners and angles and edges. I know I'm not going to get this whole thing totally flat, so I think this may be an issue that I'm going to have to deal with putting some of that primer sealer on and work on this over a course of a few days. But I think the overall result, when that's done, it'll be a nice little upgrade for the motorcycle. And where these parts continue, of course, is going to be, everything is going to be shiny black there. So that should be really nice. To show where this piece goes in there, and that'll be a continuation into some nice shiny material. That'll be really nice. And this is what being able to lay everything out ahead of time, have plenty of pictures of the bike while it's one part, it gives you a lot of choices. Now I needed to reinforce in my mind, this is the stock set of instruments, and I wanted to show this. This is the stock GS instruments. And when I painted the ones that are on the motorcycle now, it was a monumental job pulling that thing all apart and everything. But you know what? Every time I ride the bike, what I'm looking at for a good part of the ride are the instruments. So having a nice set of clean instruments to me is worth the effort. Now during the FZR restoration, I had thought of one of the things I would have loved to have done, but we just ran out of time. This restoration took over 9 months, and then I crashed the bike and had to fix it, so it just got out of control. But what happened is, I wanted to make a carbon fiber dashboard because those instruments just sit into a plate. Never had the time to do it, but it's a future project. And to me, this is one of the things I like about every motorcycle. When you turn that on, and you see your gauges and instruments, it's worth a little effort right now today to get that nice. Plus, in my mind, there's another value to it. It's one less flat black part on a motorcycle. And I like to think that in the case of all the restorations that I've done, and the ones I still haven't done yet, assuming I live a couple more years, the issue is always it boils down to details and not taking shortcuts. And those instruments may take a lot longer than I thought, but the bottom line is I'm going to be looking at those instruments every time I ride the bike. So after grinding away here, I see I'll eventually be able to grind almost all of it off. But if I don't, what I'm always afraid will happen if I don't get down to where it's perfectly flat. And then what's going to happen, the first coat of primer is going to have hairs on it. I'm going to have to sand it and prime it, sand it, prime it. But I don't care, because if I leave this and just prime over it, what's going to happen? All these little things are going to show through in the final coat of clear a month after I put it out in the sun. So this right now, and getting rid of this texture, it's going to be an upgrade. It doesn't sound like it would be much of an upgrade at this point. But you know, the truth is, we're on a winter day. It's 35 degrees out there. We still can paint. But it definitely wouldn't be an appropriate day for going, not for me, for going for an enjoyable ride. 35% chance of rain. So I'm glad I bought a lot of different grits of sandpaper, and I bought one of these sanding pad things. These are all good. I'm going to experiment with them, see if any of them are worth spending time, but mostly this is all going to have to be done by hand. So rather than just sit and hope some Luciano comes over and sands it for me, I just better get busy sanding. And then I want everything to have a 600 etch on it before I prime it. Now as I'm working this part out, and I'm getting there with this the little palm sander, but here's what I did. What happens with these is you only wear the sandpaper out on most of them right on the point. So what I did is I just made a new point on it. See, it's not, and I can just keep moving that point off to the side, off to the back, because all I'm really using to sand is that corner, that point. That does all the work. And on a little part like this, it's getting in all those little edges and corners. And believe me, if you paint over that, that's going to come through the final paint. This has to be flat before I move on to the next step. And I know that because I've made that mistake already many times. Well, I think the last thing here, we're going to have to get some 600 paper and just final sand that, and it'll be ready. Make some kind of a handle for it. It'll be ready to prime. That was a lot of work. That's more work than you see on video. Now with all the rough stuff done, the last thing is the 600. Try to smooth this out, because what's going to happen when we put the primer on this for the first time is going to be that feeling that it's going to have hairs coming out of the primer. I don't know how to describe that. But after we sand that, maybe once or twice, and put the second or third coat of primer on, it'll be fine. This is the kind of thing that I'm prepared to spend a lot of time on this part, because I know I'm going to be looking at this for a long time. And just like the instruments on any device, I don't want to be looking at something that I could have made a little bit better had I just spent an extra hour or two, or a day or two, or whatever. But at this point, it's not a pretty job. It's going to be nice when we get a couple of coats of primer on this and start sanding it down. And it is a part you're going to see. What we need is a way to hold this while we prime it and paint it. And the hot glue's been working pretty well so far. And we know we can get it off with alcohol or sandpaper or whatever. So once we have this handle on, this is ready for the first coat of primer. Final thing, of course, is the prep ball and a tack rag. And Karen just checked the weather for me. She's looked and they said no rain for an hour and 20 minutes. 2 hours ahead they can predict it. So it looks like if it's my lucky day, I'll get this and I'll get the black on the fairing, and then I'll celebrate by having a stromboli or having something, I don't know what. Anyway, we are ready. Now this is where I can use up all of these cans. Each one has a little bit in there. They're pretty low on air pressure, and they're gonna make not a great job, but it doesn't really matter, because we know this part is going to need 2, 3, 4 sand outs of primer. And as it's up by the heating vent, we have the normal amount of hair and fuzz and roughness that's normal with the first coat. What I'll probably do is get 2 or 3 coats on, maybe 20 minutes apart, and then tomorrow start the sanding. You really need to let it sit overnight if you put 2 or 3 coats of primer on. So I think that'll be the plan for that. And, well, we just got to see how the weather's going to play out. I'd like to get that black on today, but I don't want to risk that I'm going to be in the middle of a rainstorm. Now my hope is that the weather's going to hold out for another half an hour or so I can get that fairing painted. And if that comes to fruition, it means I'll be ready to do graphics in the next couple of days. Now we were pretty lucky. The weather seems like it held out, even though there's never a guarantee about this weather. 2 coats, 20 minutes apart, roughly 20 minutes apart. That'll go down by a heating vent overnight, and we will be ready. The other part is already dry in a full day. I got the inside painted on one, so all the edges are covered now. It should be really good. And we will be ready next couple days, however it plays out, to lay out our arrowheads and our 650 graphics. Well, we really made the most out of today. Parts are drying up by the heating vent. This guy's ready to sand. And I can remember painting a lot of Ducati mirrors and various plastic things, and When you have to sand them and put sanding scratches in and prime it, that you really do need 3-4 coats of prime. But I'll get a lot of that done, and I don't care how long I have to sand this away. We'll eventually have a smooth coat of primer, and I think we'll have a really nice dashboard for the motorcycle. As I'm driving it, I'm going to be looking at this for a long time, hopefully. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.